Joshua Fogel is a sinologist, historian, and translator who specializes in the history of modern China. His focus is cultural and political relations between China and Japan. He works at the Canada Research Chair for History of Modern China at York University in Toronto. Joshua, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
First, we just heard that report there from our correspondent. How does the digitization process help with collective memory versus, sort of traditional museums, traditional history lessons? How does digitizing change that for a future world?
Well, there's the obvious thing that was just mentioned, that it is now, the number of scholars that would like to see it, by the time they all touch those documents, they would disintegrate. So the fact that they're now going to be available and hopefully on the internet, so that anybody interested in the subject can then have a look at their own library or through their own computers. So it's a great boon to research.
In the West, and particularly the U.S., when there's talk of World War II, there's very little discussion about China and its occupation, and few know much about the massacre in Nanjing. Why is that, and is anything being done to change that, do you think?
Well, I think if we were to have this discussion 15 or 20 years ago, that would be truer. Things are changing. The reason is, I think, fairly simple. It's far away from the West, and it's far away from Western experience. And people of a generation older than me, most of them, if they had fought in World War II, fought in the European theater or somewhere in North Africa. Far fewer, although not few, of course, far fewer would have been in Asia. And if they had been, very, very few Westerners were in China. So it's unknown. But the more it gets known, it's becoming part of the curriculum of historical studies.
You've argued, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've argued that for diaspora communities, memories of a significant tragedy at home help develop a sense of cultural identity. Is that the case with the Chinese diaspora?
That's my feeling. Of course, I'm not a member of that diaspora, but observing it from the outside, that's my feeling, and I'm not even sure that it's necessarily a good thing, but it's certainly happening. For the 30 or 40 years after the Nanjing massacre, there was very little attention to it in anywhere except Japan, perhaps. But now there's a growing awareness among the Chinese diaspora community about this, and as a result, elsewhere in the world.
And I imagine you would argue that that's important for that community abroad?
Well, it must be, because they've taken that ball and run with it. So yeah, it is clearly.
How does the Nanjing massacre figure into current geopolitical issues?
That's a difficult question. It depends what day of the week you ask. It seems if you were to track the 75 years since the end of World War II, it would be, I don't know, mountains and valleys. At certain peaks, it sparks conflict between the governments of China and Japan. At present, we seem to be in a kind of a lull. I wonder if this new digitization project will bring to the surface feelings that have lain dormant for the last few years. But even as few as 15 or 20 years ago, it was a real hot button issue.
So we're neither on a mountain nor in a valley at the moment?
Yes, to continue that metaphor, I think that's probably about right.